Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to part 2, where we are exploring what to do instead when something goes wrong. So, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, last week we talked about what often happens when something goes wrong, and thinking about, in particular, something big going wrong. And for the purpose of the episode, I talk a lot about a physician who gets terminated without cause, because unfortunately that is a scenario that happens more often than you would think, and it's devastating. We could expand the thinking to include any time where there is some challenge. Could be professional, it could be personal, it could be there's a bad outcome. Whether or not there was something wrong that was done or not, it's just a bad outcome. This could be receiving some kind of bad news at work. You didn't get a promotion, some kind of disciplinary action. Someone else got chosen for something over you, or you got assigned to do something. I don't know. We could go through a lot of different examples, but as we talked about last week, when something big happens, it's very common for us to assume inordinate responsibility for it, to constantly be chasing and searching for answers which may not be there. And I walked through a number of assumptions that we commonly make that are generally not helpful. Again, coming from the perspective of we are trained to be highly responsible people. We are socialized before we get into medicine, generally as highly responsible people. And we do have a high degree of responsibility because we provide, a service to people that can be life or death. So there's no denying that. But that often translates itself into other situations where we feel unusually responsible for things that happen in a way that is not fair or realistic to us. So just to recap what those common assumptions are, I talked about assuming that logic applies in all situations, assuming that everything is preventable, that we are an emotional mess, we are a hot mess in some way, and that all the other adults have everything figured out and know what they're doing and are logical, rational creatures. We assume that we are responsible for all the bad outcomes and never responsible, but just lucky when something good happens. And then finally, we also tend to assume that other people's decisions, judgments, experiences are correct. And this has to do with this weird place where we are often feeling like we are highly responsible and yet constantly wrong or not enough. And again, the socialization of medical training really puts us into that space. So what do we do? I think we have to first just acknowledge that it's very easy for us to sit in that space and make those assumptions and beat ourselves up over and over again. That's another part of the socialization of medicine, is that we learn how to police ourselves, and we are often our harshest critic. Remember, the most difficult instructor you had in your medical training, or could have been some other situation, right? The one who was the meanest, the hardest. Have you internalized that voice? I'll go back to one of my clients who likes to call it the old white man in her head who's yelling at her. she's trained as a surgeon, as a high-level subspecialty surgeon, right? And she has this internal dialogue that she's internalized that is not her own voice, but again, probably her meanest, most unreasonable, most probably unhelpful instructor, right? We've internalized these voices in order to feel better and to come up with sustainable ways of existing in this role. We need to change that dialogue. We need to change that inner voice. And it first comes from awareness that we have internalized this meanness, this self judgment, this feeling of constantly not being enough before we're going to be able to change it. Today, though, what I want to focus on is what do we do instead? So, if we have recognized that something has happened, we know that we are people who tend to have a lot of negative self judgment. What do we actually do when something difficult does happen? First things first is I'm going to say it this way. I'll put a caveat on it, but we need to allow the emotions. What are we actually feeling? And can we notice it? Can we name it? Can we let it be there before we are trying to push it away, shove it down, judge ourselves for having feelings at all, let alone these feelings? Can we notice? I feel angry. I feel sad. I feel worried. I feel guilty. I feel responsible. I feel scared. What are the emotion words that come up that you're feeling? Do you feel it someplace in your body? Imagine you've just received bad news. And again, we're going to call it the flavor of you've just been suddenly let go. You've been told that you didn't get the promotion. You've been told there's some bad outcome, and you're involved in some way, or it was your patient and you're disappointed, it's somebody that you know well. What are those emotions that come up to the surface? It is really challenging often for us to sit with that. And it may not be something you can do in the moment, right? It really depends on the context. But you need to allow yourself to be a human, allow yourself to have feelings and be able to notice them, to say, I'm not weird for having this. If something bad happens to my patient, whether or not I was responsible for it, I also can have some feelings about it. I can also feel really sad. I can feel, of course, I could feel guilty. I could feel a number of different things, but if I can name the emotion and allow myself to have that in addition to whatever else I'm going to do, right, then I'm not denying my own humanness. And how often do we do that, right? All the time. We are so afraid of the discomfort of letting ourselves have feelings because it's implied, over and over and over again that we shouldn't have feelings. We do have feelings. If we are completely ignoring them, constantly shoving them down, bad things happen. So instead, first, I'm asking you to name the emotion. Now, my caveat here, right, is that depending on the urgentness of whatever it is that you've just heard, sometimes, of course, you're going to need to respond to it before you can let yourself have the feelings. I don't know. Imagine a scenario where there's something that you have to do. You're in the hospital. You just walked out of a patient's room. You're so glad you've been involved with that patient's care, and all of a sudden the code pager goes off, right? And you are, your patient is suddenly severely coding in some way, right? Of course, you are going to go respond to the code before you're going to let yourself stop and have a feeling. Now, we think that that's how it has to be all of the time, that we need to do. But some of the time, we're going to need to stop and let ourselves have the feeling. Again, not in a code situation, but we don't live in constant code situations. Okay, now some of you are saying, oh, yes, I do. That's what I do. Okay. Someone's going to be that person. Let it not be you. But we will still need to allow ourselves to have the feelings. And I imagine that if you are someone who is constantly in codes because that is what you do, you have found a way, or you can find a way to be able to let yourself have the feelings when the code is done. All right. So that's really step one. Now, I tried to think about what is the proper order for us to go in for the other steps. And again, it really depends on what the situation is. So I'm going to go through the remaining steps, and you might need to do them in whatever order seems like it's most appropriate. So there is flexibility here, but the steps themselves are important ones. So the next step that I had written down is explore what is it that's here for me to learn without self-hatred, right? So in your scenario, if something bad has happened, whether or not you are responsible for it, whether or not you made a clear mistake, you made a misjudgment, something happened, there may still be something for you to learn, but we're only really going to learn it and be healthy if we can choose to learn it without beating ourselves up for it. Things happen to bodies, as we talked about. We don't know everything. We don't always receive perfect information. Sometimes there is not perfect information to receive. Sometimes we have to say things 14 times for other people to understand what we mean. Sometimes people don't give us information in a way that we can understand. Sometimes we've forgotten to ask. Sometimes we just don't know. There is probably something for us to learn. And even in the scenario of, let's say someone is terminated without cause, they're not given any reason. Sometimes they're being told flat out, I don't have to tell you why. I don't have to give you a reason, which I would argue is cruel. But let's put that aside for the time being. There is probably something that we can learn. But again, we're going to have to do it from a place of not beating ourselves up, not hating ourselves. If you are terminated with no cause, and you've taken yourself through the list, no bad patient outcomes, no particular complaints, no discussions of something that you could do better or differently, no constructive feedback, no bad press gaining. Unfortunately, this happens, guys. What you might learn out of this situation is that this is the way that medicine currently operates. And we can choose to just see that and say, oh, for some reason, employers think that this is fair. Employers think that this is okay to just be able to dismiss people with no explanation and not necessarily any reason, or not any reason that they're going to tell you. There could be personality mismatch. There could be something that happens for some reason that they're not disclosing to you. They could just not like you. In the old default model, we might make it mean that we are wrong, that there's something wrong with us, that we are just not a good person, that we're not a good doctor, that we are just wrong. That is not a helpful lesson to learn. And again, as we talked about, that often leads to incredible harm in our lives. What we could learn is, oh, for some reason, this is how the system operates. For some reason, this group of humans, or this human in particular, has chosen to interact with me in this way and to let me go. That sucks, right? There's that emotion. This is really hard. And I'm going to learn that this is something that can happen because I've been assuming that if I worked really hard and I did all the right things and I was nice and accommodating and, just tried my best to make everybody happy, that this could never happen. Well, guess what? It did happen. Now, of course, none of us is perfect. Of course, none of us have personalities that work in all groups or all settings. Of course, sometimes we are just not a good fit and no one can put their finger on it. The idea here is not that we're saying we're perfect and infallible. The idea is just there may not be any good explanation. And maybe what I learn is sometimes things just don't work out and I won't always know why. Do you see there where I can learn that lesson and it sucks and I don't have to be happy to learn it, but there's probably some utility to learning that things don't always make sense. Things aren't always fair. Things aren't always justified. And one thing does not always clearly lead to another, right? I've been assuming perhaps that logic would apply and that I would receive some sort of information about what I was doing that wasn't working or wasn't helpful before they just let me go, but they didn't. So what I've learned is you don't always get good information to be able to make a change. That is unfortunately, it's just a devastating, awful, painful life lesson, but one that we probably all learn in one way or another. So think about how can I, with curiosity, explore what there is to learn there? Now, again, if you have walked through and there's just nothing that you can put your finger on of, I think this is the reason. And I only want you to take one or two passes through here. Let's not sit and stew and micromanage our past interactions. Micro scrutinize, I guess would be the more proper term, because we can do that to ourselves to death, and that's not going to help us. But if we really can't think of why something has happened, okay, this is one of those situations where logic may not apply. I can't come up with a good reason, or people are not sharing with me, or maybe they don't have a good reason. But regardless, here we are. I'm learning that sucky things can happen, and I don't always get to understand why. The next thing that is helpful here is to choose to have your own back, even if you made a mistake. Again, we are not perfect. We are not infallible. We make mistakes from time to time. Sometimes we didn't know what to do in the scenario. We made a wrong choice. Sometimes we knew what to do and it didn't go well. Sometimes we're doing all the right stuff and it's still not fixing the problem. When you can choose to remember that you're a good person, to remember that you work hard and you try your best, and even you working hard and trying your best and being the expert that you are isn't going to solve all of the problems. It isn't going to cure all the disease. It isn't going to get rid of 100% of the cancer cells. It is not going to always win the race. Can you have your own back? Can you say, I did everything that I could do with what I had, with what I knew, with where I was? I trust that I can learn, I can grow, I can have my own back. I'm not going to beat myself up. Even if I made a mistake, because you have made mistakes in your life, my friends. I have, you have, we all have. Sometimes those mistakes have more consequences than others, of course. But if you're going to throw yourself under the bus over and over and over again, where's your mental health going to be? It's not going to be in a good place. Can you take responsibility for mistakes? Can you take responsibility for your reasonable part of things that happen? Yes, of course you can. But can you also have your back as you do that? When we apologize, right? When we make a mistake, we aren't throwing ourselves at the feet of somebody else and saying, I'm the worst person ever. I'm the most horrible person. That's not helpful. We can say, I'm sorry. Something that I did or said has hurt you. That wasn't my intention, or I, wasn't thinking about my actions, right? We can apologize with humility, but not lose ourselves in that. So choosing to have your own back, whether or not you actually made a mistake. So important. Think about how you would take care of a friend who was going through a similar circumstance, right? Even if something horrible happened, even if they made a mistake, are you going to make that mean that they're a terrible person? Probably not. Even if it's something that you kind of can't believe happened, you are probably going to see that this person tried. This person works hard. Something happened. Because we can't prevent and know all of the things, you can have your own back here. The last thing that I want to talk about is, of course, if there is a repair to make it. Again, I'm intentionally not going in a super particular order because it really depends on the situation, right? But if there is a repair to make it. If you made a mistake in a relationship, whether that's a relationship with a patient or someone that you work with or someone at home or someone in your life, go through this process, take care of yourself, understand your emotions, right? Understand if there's something for you to learn here, and then repair. Now, can we do this 100% of the time? No, we can't probably. And again, the order in which we do this may change depending on what it is, right? But there are a lot of people that we will see over and over and over again. And we will make mistakes because we are human, right? Again, there's lots of reasons why that happens, but mistakes happen, or harm, or just miscommunication. All of these things occur between humans. And again, whether that's patients or people that you work with, or people at home, or people that you love, you will mess it up sometimes. They will mess it up sometimes. You will both mess it up sometimes. Things happen. Let's repair it. And and we are able to move through it. But again, we probably need to at least recognize what's going on with our own emotions before we can do that, right? Before we can really, really, truly do that. Because if we are all up in our feelings or we're shoving our feelings down, we're probably not going to be able to repair it in the same way. Now, I'm going to split hairs a little bit, right? That's different if you're jumping into action because something needs to happen emergently to repair whatever happened, right? Um, Again, you could think of something in the OR, you could think of some medication problem. What I'm talking about here, though, is generally not in that urgent setting where something has happened. You have a chance to respond to it. You have a chance to allow your emotions to be there before you repair it, because most of the time that's actually going to be the case. So we don't jump into repair most of the time before we've had a chance to process our feelings. But again, there is flexibility here. So I hope that this is a helpful framework. Again, let me go through these 4 different steps. So we're going to allow, name, acknowledge our feelings, right? There's lots of studies out there that show that when we can name the emotion, affect labeling is another name for it, when we can call it out, when we can say it out loud or just acknowledge it to ourselves, this is the feeling. Does it have to be exactly the right words? No, but does it help to be able to find what it is that you're feeling? Get one of those emotions wheels, right? Where you can get, I don't know, there's probably different versions, but there's lots and lots and lots and lots of feeling words out there, right? Be able to identify what is it that I'm feeling. Name it, label it, be able to feel where it is in your body, right? Because that helps us to be able to move through it rather than sit in it, shove it down, pretend it's not there, judge ourselves for it, all of which is incredibly unhelpful, but it's something that we do all the time. Next is explore what there is to learn here, but without self-hatred, right? That requires us to maintain a little bit of curiosity. It requires us to acknowledge that there might be a voice in our head telling us that we're like the worst and we should know better, but that's not actually helpful. That's not actually how we learn and grow. So, what is there for me to, is there something for me to learn, even if it's something really awful, like sometimes there's not a good reason for people making shitty decisions about each other. I'm going to have to put the explicit wording on there. I just dropped a swear word. Okay. Choosing to have your own back, even if you've made a mistake, right? Super important. Something that we don't often do. Again, we're socialized away from that, but it is really important for a sustainable career that you can choose to acknowledge that you are a fallible human, but you will support yourself. You will trust yourself. Even if there is something for you to learn and, some repair to make, you will have your own back because you trust that you are a good human. And then finally, if there is a repair to make it. Don't put it off. Don't delay it indefinitely. If you can't actually make a repair for whatever reason, is there a way that you can sort of make that repair emotionally, cosmically, spiritually? Do you need to write a letter, and burn it into the air? Do you need to make a phone call? Do you need to, come up with a loving kindness meditation that addresses the situation because you can't actually apologize to the person? Or we can imagine a lot of different scenarios, but can you do your best to try and repair and sort of bring a close to the situation? So again, I hope that is helpful. This is, as I said, part 2 to this 2-part series, where last week I talked about the assumptions that we tend to get stuck in, looking for answers, judging ourselves, beating ourselves up for it. This is what I want us to start doing instead. Things are going to happen that are difficult. Again, bad outcomes, losing our jobs, getting a diagnosis ourselves that is challenging, or seeing a friend or a loved one go through a difficult diagnosis, right? Things happen, and this process can still apply. I hope that is helpful. As always, thank you for listening, and please let me know, what did I miss here? Because I am imagining that some of you lovely humans also have other things that you find incredibly helpful when something difficult happens, and I'd love to hear from you. So you can reach me at Megan, Megan, at healthierforgood.com. My friends, I hope you have a wonderful week. Until next time, take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.